Everything we know about earthquakes leads us to wonder, what if a massive 9.2 magnitude earthquake struck the Earth? Let's start with an intriguing idea, even if it seems like a story from a world of imagination. It is true that this idea may seem improbable, but reality reminds us that major seismic disasters have occurred throughout history. The world has witnessed violent tremors that caused fires and tsunamis and destroyed entire cities. In this video, we will review some historical seismic events, from the 2023 Turkey-Syria earthquake to major quakes in Japan, United States of America, China, and others. We will learn the facts and figures behind each disaster. We will also see the impact of these earthquakes on places once considered relatively safe, and how people survived the disasters. Together, we will discover what could happen if a similar earthquake struck unexpected areas. Finally, we will learn some simple guidelines that could help everyone survive if such an earthquake occurs, with tips suitable for adults and children alike. Let's begin our dive into the depths of facts and stories together. In 2023, a massive 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck the border region of Turkey and Syria, one of the most powerful tremors in the Middle East. This earthquake resulted in the death of over 50,000 people, while thousands of homes and structures were destroyed. Thousands of buildings were destroyed, water and gas pipelines exploded, and roads and bridges collapsed under the severe shaking. Going back to 2011, Japan experienced a devastating earthquake of approximately magnitude 9. It was one of the most famous earthquakes in modern times. Its magnitude was over 9 on the Richter scale, leading to a giant tsunami that swept across the Japanese coastline. Then, in 1964, the strongest earthquake recorded in United States history struck the cities of Alaska and Anchorage. It had a magnitude of 9.2, and its shaking lasted for nearly 4 minutes. This resulted in a giant tsunami that rose over 8 meters and surged onto the Alaskan coast at a terrifying speed. The village of Chenega was completely destroyed due to this immense force of nature. It was inhabited by 68 people, but the number of victims was only 23 individuals. The sole reason the death toll was not higher was the sparse population in that remote area. In contrast, when an earthquake of similar magnitude struck a densely populated country like Japan in 2011, tens of thousands were killed. In Japan, people are always prepared for such disasters, and they had plans and procedures for the population in the event of earthquakes. Now imagine if an earthquake of the same force struck a densely populated area in the heart of the United States of America, where no one expects a disaster of this violence. How would people survive in an area not accustomed to facing this type of disaster? This question leads us to an incident not widely known today. The area around the Mississippi River witnessed a similar disaster over 200 years ago, in a place that was very rural at the time. In December 1811, the inhabitants of the small town of New Madrid awoke to intense ground tremors. Furniture flew into the air and buildings collapsed together. Even trees were uprooted and fell to the ground. People rushed terrified into the streets to witness the scene, as sand erupted from beneath the earth like active springs everywhere. Moreover, church bells began ringing on their own, and chimneys collapsed in places hundreds of kilometers away from New Madrid. According to modern estimates, the magnitude of the first earthquake was about 6.7 to 8.0. However, the news was taken lightly in Washington at the time. The area was then struck by 2 other strong tremors in January and February of the following year, with magnitudes of about 7.5 and possibly more. Even the mighty Mississippi River reversed its course. The water surged back rapidly, and strong waves sank all boats at the dock on the shore. The muddy riverbed began to swell and flow from all directions, adding to the terror and chaos of the scene. The ground shaking reached even Washington District of Columbia itself, where people felt those distant tremors. The tremors spread across a vast area of about 2.5 million square kilometers of the country. In addition to the massive shocks, scientists detected about 2,000 smaller successive aftershocks. When research teams reached New Madrid, they discovered deep craters up to 40 meters deep in the soil, some directly under houses. Some of these craters were completely filled with sand, like giant sand springs. But what caused such a disaster in the heart of the United States? And what is the probability of its recurrence today? In the 19th century, the area was almost devoid of people, whereas today it represents a major urban corridor housing about 45 million people in potential danger. This means that a similar disaster would multiply the risks, making the recent disaster in Turkey 2023, 50,000 dead, seem small compared to the potential repercussions here. It is not difficult to imagine the scale of possible destruction if a similar earthquake occurred in a place of high population density. How did people actually survive those horrific past disasters? Let's start with one of the most famous examples in the American West. The most prominent was the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, considered one of the most powerful in American history. On April 18, 1906, a series of tremors struck San Francisco with a magnitude of about 7.9. The intense shaking caused the street to crack as if it were a moving wave, and most houses ended up flattened on the ground. Then, massive fires broke out and continued for 3 consecutive days after all means of communication and power were cut off. The earthquake destroyed 80% of the city, leaving 300,000 people homeless in a single night. Police used force to stop looting, as officers were given authorization to shoot lawbreakers. The number of injured people and casualties mounted in overcrowded hospitals. In the end, the number of victims was estimated at about 3,000 people who perished as a result of the earthquake and its effects. Thus, the authorities learnt the lesson and developed a special emergency plan to teach the population basic earthquake survival rules. First, if you are inside a building when an earthquake occurs, take cover under a sturdy table or strong piece of furniture. Second, stay completely away from windows, glass, and anything that might fall on you, such as shelves or fragile walls. Third, avoid using elevators entirely, as you might get trapped or fall from a great height. Fourth, do not move during the earthquake. Wait until the shaking stops completely in your safe place. Fifth, if you are outside during the tremor, immediately seek a wide, open space away from buildings and trees. And if you are near the coast, run to the highest possible point away from the beach, because a tsunami may threaten you after the earthquake ends. Following these rules kept the number of victims low. For example, when the 1994 Los Angeles earthquake struck, magnitude about 7.0, only 60 people died. This is because Californians know well that the cause of their earthquakes is the friction of the Pacific Plate against the American Plate along the long San Andreas Fault. But what about New Madrid today? Many know about the past incident, but few hear about it when earthquake news occurs. Even governments lack clear emergency plans if an earthquake were to occur in this region again. On the tectonic plate map, the North American plate appears unified in that region without clear fractures. It is likely that deep in the earth there is a crack or a small plate that scientists have not yet noticed. Meanwhile, another danger was revealed in the Pacific Northwest one day. In the 1980s, scientists discovered an abandoned cedar forest near the Copalis River in Washington, looking like a ghost forest. The trees were stripped of leaves and branches, as their roots were suddenly submerged in salt water. When analyzing the soil layers around it, researchers found that it seemed as if the bank had collapsed downward all at once. Analysis of the tree growth rings showed they stopped growing in the year 1699, indicating that a massive tsunami struck the region in the winter of 1700. In the winter of 1700, huge tsunami waves occurred, believed to have exceeded 15 meters in height in some places. Scientists believe this colossal wave came as a result of the Great Cascadia earthquake of 1700. The Cascadia region is located north of the San Andreas Fault and extends about 960 kilometers along the west coast. Moreover, a smaller plate called the Juan de Fuca plate is subducting beneath North America, causing earthquakes that may reach magnitude 9 or even 10. This region is threatened by a series of large Cascadia earthquakes, and experts predict that a new wave of violent earthquakes is coming there. Seismologists have indicated that activity patterns suggest the Cascadia disaster could strike soon. However, preparations in the region remain limited. Phone alerts may give only a few minutes at most before the violent shaking. If the earthquake occurs at night, the shaking will be accompanied by pitch darkness, making finding shelter extremely difficult. In fact, 3/4 of the buildings in Oregon and Washington were built without accounting for such seismic disasters. Therefore, tens of thousands of structures will collapse and slide off their foundations, turning into piles of rubble. Most roads, bridges, power lines, and utilities will be damaged, and hospitals and fire stations will not escape harm. After the shaking subsides, the next challenge will come: the powerful tidal waves, tsunami, coming from the ocean. Therefore, everyone must run away from the coast to higher ground immediately after the earthquake ends, because the incoming wave will undoubtedly catch them. In any case, the casualties from a Cascadia disaster could reach about 13,000 dead and more than 27,000 injured. If the earthquake occurs at the peak of summer when beaches are crowded with vacationers, these numbers could double with the sweeping wave. Therefore, scientists advise constantly checking seismic news and securing heavy furniture at home with strong wires and bolts. Meanwhile, studies on the new Madrid region continued to gather more evidence. Data revealed that the North American plate is internally divided into small parts that have been stable for millions of years. This means that the massive earthquakes in the central region are not the result of recent deep plate movement. On the other hand, ancient geological layers show that such seismic sequences occur approximately every 200 to 300 years. Even reinforcing foundations will not suffice here, as buildings will literally sink into liquefied sand as the ground shakes. And if we venture outside, we will face sand springs and rapidly forming sinkholes like traps. And it is not just Memphis that is threatened. Earthquakes with a magnitude of 7.5 would also sink skyscrapers in St. Louis, Nashville, Kansas City, and Cincinnati. And if the magnitude rises to 8 degrees, cities like Minneapolis, Detroit, and Dallas would also sink. And the matter will not stop there. The earthquakes would destroy roads and petroleum pipelines, and would cause some buildings to shake even in Washington and New York. Given that this disaster differs from others, the time-tested rules of San Francisco will not help in the long term. Tremors could repeat month after month. In the end, a new earthquake in New Madrid could cost the lives of approximately 1 million people, making it deadlier than any known earthquakes in history. And if the scientists' estimates are correct, the probability of a tremor with a magnitude of 6 in the region could reach 40% by the year 2050. Worse still, even now, with all this frightening news, we are not taking the necessary measures. Many remain silent and unprepared. Therefore, the time has come to take immediate action before it is too late. The currently available option is to relocate to safer areas in America. Starting with the state of Maine seems ideal, as it has never experienced earthquakes and its inhabitants enjoy tranquility and peace. As for sunny Florida, it is also less exposed to earthquakes, although it faces other risks such as hurricanes. Even if other disasters like hurricanes occur, they will not be seismic to the same degree. So what is your opinion? What steps will you take to ensure your safety if such a massive earthquake occurs? Share your plans and ideas for staying safe with us.